Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here and share some of my studies with you. I am a PhD candidate in psychology in Brazil, also a lawyer, but a non-practice lawyer. And I will talk about my theme of research, my actual theme or research in Brazil, which is until death do us part, the femicide trials in the Brazilian jury court. So until death do us part is a popular saying, a popular idiom, which is used in ceremonies in Brazil, I think maybe in other countries, but in ceremonies like such as marriage. And it usually refers to a long-term relationship, but in some cases it goes pretty bad, and like with someone killing the other in a couple, in a relationship, like we can see around the world. And I will speak specifically about Brazil. So the purpose of this presentation is to talk a little bit, to try to understand and to comprehend aspects that inform the decision-making of Brazilian jurors in femicide trials. The jury in Brazil is really specific. I will talk more about that later. But the fact is that we are maybe the only country in the world where the jurors do not deliberate. They decide alone by themselves to yes or no questions. So it's and the law says that jurors must decide with their conscience and the dictates of law. So we don't know exactly what jurors take into consideration when deciding. So I will talk a little bit about femicide, the jury procedure in Brazil. Then I will present the research method, and then I will share with you some preliminary results. This is an ongoing project, so we have to go deep in some aspects. So femicide was an expression first used in the 90s, in the 70s, by Diana Russell at the International Court of Crimes Against Women in Brussels, Belgium, to refer to a series of acts of violence committed against women that resulted in death. But the term became really famous in Latin America after the case, the Algodonero case, which was a case that happened in Mexico, in the border between Mexico and the United States, at the city Juarez. Because Mexico was considered guilty by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights because of its failure to investigate these deaths, many deaths of women in Latin America. So the term became really popular in all around Latin America, and it starts a mobilization to turn this form of crime or increase the penalty in some cases. So we have a movement that started with Costa Rica in 2007, and then other countries. These are some example, just some example that follow this tendency. So Brazil was one of those. It was actually one of the latest to do this, to criminalize femicide. Actually, we had a prior penalty for that, but it was a huge category, which was homicide. So after 2015, we had a specific law to increase the penalty in femicide cases. Around the same time, the World Health Organization considered that Brazil occupied the 5th position between the countries where women were killed the most. So it was attendance, but also a necessity to establish and to show that this was something that needed attention. So the Brazilian law, each country has deal with that in a way. So some countries like Costa Rica, Peru, Bolivia, and Mexico, they created specific crimes. Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, they have created some causes that turns the penalty larger. So this is the example of Brazil. If the homicide is committed, so to kill someone, if the homicide is committed against women for reasons for being female, and so this is a large definition. So the law also tries to help us to understand that, and it states that reasons of being female is when the crime involves domestic and family violence, and also contempt or discrimination against the condition of a woman. So, as I told you, femicide is one specific feature of a homicide, a kind of a homicide, and it follows the jury procedure. The jury in Brazil is really has a really narrow competence. So just criminal, we just have criminal juries. We don't have civil juries. And also, not even all crimes go to the jury, just intentional crimes against life, which are homicide, abortion, still, infanticide, and when you help someone to commit suicide. The jury selection in Brazil is super brief, no questions are allowed. We just have 7 jurors, and there are 3 peremptory challenges for each part, both for the defense attorney and the prosecutor. As I said to you before, there is also this incommunicability rule, which is the opposite of the deliberation, and jurors do not deliberate, they decide according to their conscience and the dictates of justice. That is exactly what the Brazilian Criminal Procedural Code states. So the research method, I worked with document analysis, so analyzing the historic of the law at first, but around the 80s, the law actually admitted that the man killed her partner, and then we had many changes before that, and also the criminal files that of the cases that I observed. I developed an ethnographic observation. Actually, I observed more than 30 trials, but I consider for this analysis only 14 of them, because these were the cases where I contact the jurors and I had the prior approval from the ethics committee. So these were the ones that I considered for this presentation, and I also talked with 39 jurors who have participated in femicide trials. Some of them participated in more than one. So I think people are not seeing the change of slides. I can try again. Let me see.
Slides are not moving, I guess. You can try again.
Is it okay now? Is it in research methods or not?
You need to click on the presentation view so that it will enlarge and slides can move. Like this, it won't move slides. You need to like bottom down right side. You have a small cup shape symbol if you can find. Right side, completely bottom down. You have a small cup shape symbol. Just minimize, maximize option is there, right? So just beside that, you have small cup shape symbol.
I don't think I understand that. You're sharing screen.
Screen already shared, but slides are not moving. To just move your slides, you need to click on the presentation view.
Okay. I don't think it's working.
Yeah.
Yes,
there. Yeah, click on there. No, not there. Down.
Here.
Yes. There. Yes.
Okay.
It's not okay.
No, my God.
Okay, then go ahead. Then by clicking on each slide
I
you can
will try for the last time, but
yeah. Now perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So here's the profile of the jurors profile, the ones who I interviewed for the research. And so they were, the participation between male and female was quite similar. So we had 49% of female and 51% of male. The average age was 42 years old, the youngest with 22 and the oldest with 62. This is not the a common profile, but I conducted the research during the pandemic time. So that's probably why they were younger than the usual. The jurors training, they were really well educated. This definitely does not correspond to the Brazilian scenario. So 74% of them had completed or were in progress with higher education. That means college or university. The most common area was law. In the origin, and this is something because in Brazil, people can volunteer to become a juror. And the fact is that when you are a law student or you have a law degree and you want to become like a judge or a prosecutor, being part of the jury gives you some extra points. So that's why many people from the law area volunteer. So 6% of the jurors were nominated by the employers and 30% volunteered. 10% did not know. So some sociodemographic aspects. This is interesting because, as I said to you, the jurors decide alone. They didn't talk. So these aspects can exert more influence than usually they do, like in other countries where they deliberate and need to reach unanimous verdicts. In Brazil, also the decisions are made by majority. So we have 7 jurors. When you have a 4-3, you can consider someone guilty or acquit this person. So, the first question was, did you consider the crime you judge femicide? When the person have participated of more than one trial, I considered a yes when the person says at least one yes for one case. Yes for one case. So people tend to recognize femicide. So 80% of the people that I interviewed recognized. in at least one trial. So here we have a surprise. This is not, again, it's a qualitative study, so it's not, there's no statistically difference, but it's interesting to note that the men have recognized femicide more frequently than women. So this is something that goes against the current literature and needs further attention. We have to investigate this in a more systematically way. But and also another important thing to consider is methodological, because I was the one who interviewed them, and maybe the fact that they were interviewed by a female researcher can have exert some influence on their answers. Another thing is that this dialogue with an interesting case in which I interviewed all of the jurors, so the 7 of the same case, and I knew prior to interview, before I interviewed them, that the result was 5-2. So 5 people recognized femicide and 2 voted against femicide. And when I interviewed them, 6 of them told me that they recognized femicide and 1 did not. So one of these jurors lied to me, and this is also a data of the research that is interesting to problematize and deal with and hypothesize and can lead to further investigation. By age, here we can see maybe the more consistent difference, because there is a pattern, but when you check just the oldest, you see that so they were more than 44 years. So we can see a more perceptive difference. So the oldest people recognize less femicide. This is probably a generational issue and also can be further explored. The view by education level, so higher education means that people went to the college or university, and lower educations means that they did not. And we can see a tiny difference here, a slightly difference in the sense that lower education people recognize a little bit more femicide, but as I said to you, this is not a quantitative study. And here, viewed by legal training, so lawyers and law students also recognize less femicide. This is interesting because when I interviewed them, they told me that they decide following according to the law, but when I tried to understand better what was they considered the law, they were all frequently just mentioning domestic violence and not other forms. So then we go to the content analysis, and I asked the jurors what femicide is to them. We have 4 most prevalent categories. The first one is domestic violence, which is the first part of the article of the law at the penal code, the Brazilian penal code. But we have 3 other explanations for that based on strength difference, being a woman. So this is something that the law states, but I will provide you some examples of what people consider that, and also possession. So the categories, the first one, domestic violence. What does that mean? aggression in the family environment, existence of a protective measure. So we have, there is in Brazil, Maria da Penha law, which is a law that protects women of gender violence in different aspects. And based on that law, the judge can provide a protective measure, like for the defendant to be away from the victim, leave the house where they used to live, and other things. So this is considered something that dialogues with domestic violence too. And this includes different types of violence, including physical, psychological, moral, and also economic. I will read one example, an excerpt of one of the interviews that show this category. So, open quotes. Femicide is the man's aggression towards the woman with that coexistence in the family environment. For me, this is the femicide that goes according to the legislation. So it's not like a man attacking a woman on the street. No, it has to be within the family scope, because the family environment is an environment of trust. It's an environment where you sleep and wake up next to someone you trust. So you will never imagine that person will attack you in your sleep or will poison you, for example. I think the legislation is right about that, because it's a bond of trust. I say it because I'm married, you know? So this was a female juror. She was a lawyer and had 40 years old. And it's interesting because she considered that femicide is
Gabriela, sorry to disturb, we are running out of time, so I request you to please.
Okay, so I had 30 minutes according to the email I received, and I just used 22.
Okay, then go ahead. Yeah, as per program is 20 minutes, but yeah.
Okay, so but I will go ahead. So the second category is strength difference. So people always refer like woman as weaker, a weaker part, the fragile sex. And I will also read an excerpt for you. I think the penalty really needs to be higher because women were weaker than men. As I said, there is no way you want to dispute strength with a man. But usually in these crimes of femicide, the woman triggers it, right? So the victim's name herself, I think she triggered it. And it was going to be a femicide because she was the one who provoked it, who left him like that. So this is interesting because although the person considers that femicide is a fair category, this should happen, the laws should contemplate this kind of form of increasing the law, she shows a sexist view. So it's interesting for us to notice that these are not things that go apart. They can be together. The third category is being a woman. So there are people who understand that to be a femicide, you have to hate all the female gender. So I will show you an excerpt too. So last week there was the issue of femicide. For me, it didn't exist. I'm not sexist, okay, Gabriela, but you kill a woman because she's a woman, a lot needs to be proven before the crime itself, you know? Because, one example, if I kill a woman, I'm committing homicide. Simple. A homicide is not for being a man. Homicide is killing someone, regardless of whether it's a woman or a child. It doesn't matter. And in the last jury, unfortunately, the prosecutor could not convince me that femicide exists. Did you understand? So I must consider everything presented to me to reach a final verdict on my vote. Femicide is killing a woman for the reason that she is a woman. Did you understand? I may have a childhood disorder, a trauma concerning my mother, for example, and that makes me not like women because they are the opposite sex to mine, for the simple fact that the person is a woman. So I don't like woman because I had a childhood trauma, which messed me with my personality. My PCK is troubled. There's a problem. So I start to unleash this trauma against people and they remind me of my mother. So in my conception, femicide would be that. So this is a male. He was 41 years old, a lawyer, and he considered that femicide should be interpreted as such. Finally, the possession category. So in Brazil, there is a popular idiom which states that if she's not mine, she won't be of anyone else's. So it's the idea that the woman, the female, the spouse is the property of the man. So this is another way that femicide can be comprehended. I will also, and finally, read an excerpt. I think it's when you take a woman's life for a silly reason, like the relationship doesn't work anymore, I don't want it anymore, it's over, that's it. Or you try to line things up, it should not get to that case. So you don't want to be in a relationship anymore, done, it's over. Not like that. From what we have seen, that's more or less like this, right? Of course, when a case appears on television, you don't really know what happened, but it's more or less always like that, the same story. Or it's been 2 months, 3 months, 6 months since they have been separated, then someone finds someone else, and then the guy goes there and ends the other person's life. Simply go to work, pick up on the street, pick up on the bakery, living at the gate. So this is a female juror, and she describes when a relationship ends and someone that didn't accept that goes and kill the other part, usually a woman. So these are some examples of this understanding concepts of femicide, and it's interesting. So to go to conclusion, that domestic violence, okay, it's one of the points that the law establishes, like the first one, but the second, contempt or discrimination against the condition of a woman, it's kind of fluid between the 3 other categories, but also many things can stay out of this, because people usually, when they describe strength, being a woman, possession, they are talking about relationships also. So many things, my point is that many things can be femicide, many femicide cases can go apart, what people do understand as such. So this is, as I told you, an ongoing research, and the further analysis wants to explore, to analyze jurors' answers regarding the application of femicide rule to transgender people. Because, so when the law was enacted in Brazil, they used a homicide committed against woman. But before the law proven, when it was just a bill to be approved for the Congress, the law was written as against gender. So to be approved, there were kinds of negotiations between the the politics and legislative, and it was approved in this way, which is has a more restrict application. But this issue is still under discussion because there was a lawsuit in Brazil, and the Superior Court of Justice have decided that it's up to the jurors, so jurors can decide if the femicide cause can be applied to transgender women too or not. So this is the next phase of the project, and we are eager to see the results. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I spent all the time.